Hello everyone, this is Bhavya. Today we'll do a mock interview with Abhishek. Hi Abhishek.
Hi everyone. Welcome back to the channel, and I'm equally excited about the mock interview. Yeah, let's get started.
So Abhishek, why don't you introduce yourself?
Sure. So yeah, my name is Abhishek. Most of you already know me, and I have 9 years of experience in software development, DevOps, cloud, and architecture. So I started my journey with TCS, and there I started as a systems engineer, where mostly I was working on Java and cloud migration. So initially, I started my journey as a Java developer, but then after 6 months, I moved to a project where we were doing cloud migration. So that continued for almost 1.5 years back in 2015, and after that, once I once I'm done with that project for the cloud migration, I moved to a different company called Modelin, where I was working as DevOps as well as I was learning Python by myself. So there I started my journey with Python. Then I've done my personal projects on Python, and yeah, I've learned a lot about Python there. And along with that, I was also doing a lot of DevOps things with Ansible, Terraform. I was learning Kubernetes. That was back in 2016. And after 1.5 years in that company, then I moved to a different company called FI Networks, where I joined that company as a Golang developer, where I worked for one of the leading Kubernetes ingress controllers, where I was part of the design development, and I developed the entire Kubernetes controller along with the team, where I learned a lot about the Kubernetes architecture. I've learned about writing Kubernetes controllers and a lot of other things. Everything there was with respect to Kubernetes and Golang development. Then currently I'm working with Red Hat, and I'm primarily working on a open source project called Argo. So where we contribute things to Argo and we build a Red Hat based solution for GitOps. So this is about a brief introduction of myself, and luckily I got opportunities to work in different streams, different cloud platforms in India, outside India. Yeah, a lot of things in this 9 years, and it's a very fascinating journey.
Yeah, that is a very great intro. So as you mentioned that you migrated some of your projects or applications to cloud, right? So how did you actually migrate applications to the cloud? And can you explain what steps have you followed to do that?
Sure. So coming to cloud migration, and basically cloud migration cannot be done overnight. So it takes a lot of time. Like I told you, for us, the first cloud migration that I've done back in 2015, it took almost 1.5 to 2 years. And cloud migration, if you have to do, you have to follow a lot of steps. For example, the steps that I've followed for the cloud migration. Initially, you need to understand your application. So there I was working for a banking application, and it was a monolithic application. So it was one big application where everything was deployed on WebSphere application on premises. But to migrate to cloud, we realized that we want to do it in small chunks. So the first thing was to convert this application or change this application from monolith to microservices. So the very first thing, if you are trying to move to cloud, is that you have to create your application in the microservices model, because microservices play very well in the cloud. So that's the first step that we have done. Basically, it involves a lot of planning, because again, you cannot simply convert your monolithic application to microservices, right? So to convert your applications to microservices, you have to plan a lot, like how many microservices do you want to deploy your application, and what each microservice is responsible for. How can you make individual microservice responsible for its own duties and responsibilities. So this involved almost 3 to 4 months of planning, where we had to design this microservice architecture. And once we have the microservice architecture, then what we have done is we have identified the least impact modules. So we have some 200 to 250 microservices, but it is always preferred to migrate least critical components to cloud first, and verify how these applications are playing in cloud. And then once everything is successful, I'll tell what are the steps that we followed in even migrating this least complicated microservices onto cloud. Then we eventually migrated another chunk of applications, another chunk, and finally we migrated all the applications onto cloud. But like I told you, the first step was planning, where we planned the microservice architecture. Then we identified the least critical components. And then what we did was then to identify, like, what are the, what is a suitable cloud provider for us. At that point of time, we had a lot of options. Even now you have, I think now you have more options than what we had then. And there what we have done is we identified that, okay, depending upon our requirements, AWS was the one that most suited for us. And we migrated this first small chunk of applications to AWS. And the biggest challenge, or one of the biggest things, was to migrate the entire data itself, right? Because there is database, there is a lot of storage, there is a lot of files that are involved. So we had to take AWS help to identify what are the suitable services for our data that we had. Then we migrated the data. And after that, we also had to take care of the network and security configurations. Because in cloud, once you deploy your applications, networking and security is one of the key things. Like, you cannot directly migrate this entire thing and say that, oh, our cloud migration is done. If you don't have network configurations and security, then there is no point of migrating. And after that, once we migrated this small chunk, then we were also taking care of the cost optimization. And post migration, we had some other challenges.
Yeah, so I was about to ask the same thing. So what exactly are the most challenges that you actually faced, because it took so long? It's more than a year. So what are some of the challenges that you faced during migration and post migration?
Okay, so coming to the migration, like during the migration, one of the toughest things was, like I told you, to identify the least impact modules and to change this entire thing into microservices. So when we migrated this everything to microservices and tried to migrate, the post migration was a lot of challenge. And coming back to your question, during migration, one of the biggest challenge was the data, not the applications. Like, okay, we were able to migrate the applications and run the applications, but how do you securely get your applications? And what AWS services, like on-premises, we have a lot of storage solutions, but on cloud, what is the best thing for you? So then we had to evaluate, take help of AWS Snowball, right? And then we realized that, okay, which AWS storage service is better for us. So that was one of the challenges. And also, because the data is huge, right? On-premises, you have a huge data. So how do you get this data onto cloud in chunks by chunks, not the applications, but the data? So using the storage gateways and all of these things, it was the challenge during the migration. And after the migration, one of the biggest challenges, we migrated to cloud, keeping into mind two things. One is reduce maintenance, and one is the cost optimization. So after the migration, we had to take care of these things. Were we actually able to achieve that? So the cost optimization was the biggest challenge, because initially we did not find that cost optimization. We migrated, and probably because we did not know the best practices, or probably we were not optimizing the cost well, then we had to write a lot of scripts. We have to monitor the cloud, create a lot of monitoring stack, set up continuous alarms. And with all of these things, we were also able to get the cost optimization in place. So this is one of the biggest challenge after migration.
Yeah, that is biggest learning even, right? So when you're actually doing on so if you imagine, if you're actually working on some Java applications over there, right? So if you imagine, if there is a Java application that becomes unresponsive, like it's not working or it's not responding to any of our commands, so how do you tackle this problem? And what do you actually, the steps what you follow, and what actually you make sure that problem does not repeat in future again?
Yeah. So, this happens obviously. Like when you are doing cloud migration, and once your applications are running in cloud, sometimes your applications are not responsive. So we also face this issue. Then there is no single answer that I can give you. But one thing probably that I would start with is to go to the application. You said that the application is not responsive. So one thing is, firstly, I'll go to the application, whether it is deployed on the Kubernetes platform or it is deployed on the virtual machine, whatever it is. So I'll go to the application, and firstly, I'll try to hit the application, try to reproduce by myself. If the application is hitting through the load balancer, I'll try to simulate the same behavior. I'll try to hit the load balancer, see if the application is firstly reaching the load balancer through the VPC and all. If the application is reaching the load balancer, then what I would check is, okay, is the load balancer forwarding the request to application? How do I do that? I can go to the load balancer logs and see if load balancer is following the request to the application. Let's say even that is happening, but the application is not giving me the response back. Then whether it is Kubernetes or the application on the virtual machine, I'll go to the application and I'll log into the application, find out the processes that are running. And the good thing or the best thing to get all the information is using the thread dumps and heap dumps. So possibly I'll take out the thread dumps first, try to see anything with respect to the threads. Is any thread not responding well? Or is there any issues with the threads? And once I get the threads out, probably I'll take the heap dump for detailed understanding. And I think mostly with that, you will be able to understand, what is going wrong with the thread. Is a thread consuming a lot of memory, or is thread leaking a lot of memory? Or so probably that will be my approach.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. So I know you have very vast experience in Kubernetes. So how do you rate yourself on Kubernetes?
So I have been working on Kubernetes kind of from 2016 or 2015. Yeah, 2016, I started working on Kubernetes, and it's almost like 6 years, 7 years now. So I think I have good knowledge on Kubernetes, because personally, I've also even, written extended Kubernetes using controllers. I've written a lot of operators. Back then, not now, but I think 2 to 3 years back, I've even contributed a couple of pull requests to Kubernetes. So yeah, I think I have good knowledge. Probably I would rate myself as 7 if you ask me.
Yeah. So actually, can you explain about any major challenge that you faced with Kubernetes and how did you actually overcome that?
Okay, yeah, I think working with Kubernetes, you face a lot of challenges each and every day, right? So even if you ask me today, I was working with one of the applications, and I was trying to understand, play around with the applications. We were trying to set up conversion webhooks for something. So it's always learning with Kubernetes, trying to understand, right? So if you ask me the major challenge that I faced back then with Kubernetes, like I think 2018 or something, where I was working, like I told, we were building an ingress controller. And when I was working with one of the solutions, so, when deploying the applications on EKS, or when deploying the Kubernetes cluster on the AWS platform, and when I try to run the applications, then secrets management, because you have a lot of Kubernetes secrets. So had a case where we don't want to put the information in the Kubernetes secrets, but we want to retrieve that from any external secrets management. So right now you can do it with a lot of things, like probably you have HashiCorp Vault, or you have any other secret-based solutions, sealed secrets, you have external secrets, a lot of secret-based solutions on Kubernetes. But back then there was no such concrete thing where you have a centralized secrets management thing. So right now, I mean, back then there is only Kubernetes secrets, which is not a centralized solution, right? So if you want to put a key that is used in multiple locations and a central secret, so what I did was I wrote a Kubernetes controller, and it tries to look for a secret in AWS Systems Manager. So what I've done is I've written a Kubernetes controller, defined a custom resource definition, and when user submits a custom resource, all that user has to do is they have to tell the Kubernetes controller using the custom resource that, hey, this is the systems manager location. This is the, where in which AWS account you want that systems manager. And then they have to provide the details for the systems manager key. And that way, the Kubernetes controller will retrieve the secret key. And yeah, so overall, what the entire thing was, there was no secrets management back then, centralized secret management, and I have achieved that. But apart from that, like I told you, it's a day-by-day learning. We had to upgrade the APIs. So when you upgrade the APIs in Kubernetes for a custom resource, how do you maintain backward compatibility? So we have to use a conversion webhook, submission controller. So yeah, some of these things.
Yeah, that actually sounds very interesting regarding that secret management. So let's move to the next question. So what are the multi-stage Docker builds and why are they very important?
Sure. So multi-stage Docker builds, basically when you're working in the container world, right? So couple of years back, there was not couple, but 3 to 4 years back, I think there was this multi-stage builds concept. So all that we used to do is we used to build a Docker image, and the whole purpose of Docker image, or the whole purpose of this thing is, as I understand, one is you have to set small footprints, not huge
Okay.
footprints like virtual machines. So containers are meant to be small. They are meant to run a single process, and they are meant to be secure. Like you have to build your own secured container, right? Because they don't have a isolation like a virtual machine has. If you're using a
Yeah.
virtual machine, you are technically isolated. You have less securities, but when you're building your own container, you have to take care of all of these things. So multi-stage Docker build is very important, because let's say you are building a Java application. Now, in your Docker file, you can take this OS base image, you can download all the Java dependencies, you can build the Java application, and runtime also you might have some dependencies. You can take everything. But if you just deploy that container as is, it will be very huge, because you have Java dependencies, you have your OS based dependencies, you have downloaded few packages. And when you have more and more packages in your container, then that container is meant to be security vulnerable, right? Because you have lot of packages, and each package every day on the internet will definitely go through security vulnerabilities. So to solve that, what Docker has done is they have introduced concept of multi-stage containers, where you can say that your first stage is a build stage, and you can download everything that you want. You can take everything, you can build that application, and finally you get a binary, right? In case of Java, you get a jar or ER file or anything. So you
Yes.
can just take that binary to a next stage, and in that next stage, you can just use any distroless image, or you can use any Docker image with very small footprints like UBA image, a universal base image, or a distroless image. If you're using a distroless image, then it's much better, because in distroless images, you don't even have package managers. So it's almost like OS base image minus package managers. So it is very, very small. And when you run the containers, you can be rest assured that at least you will not get package related security
Yes.
vulnerabilities.
Yeah. So we all know that you work on Golang, right? So like, like what is your experience in Golang, and why do you use Golang in your day-to-day activities?
Okay, so basically, I started with Java development, then I moved to Python, and finally to Go language. So
Yeah.
there is no such thing that I wanted to move, but depending upon the applications that I was working. So, the applications were driving. It's not me who was trying to move from one place to another place. But when I initially was working for a bank, they were using Java applications. But then I realized that, okay, this project is not making me learn any new things. I want to move out. And then I was trying to explore, and then, that time machine learning, or all that hype around Python. So I said, okay, let me see and explore what Python is about. And then I started learning Django and all. Then I started my open source contributions in the world of DevOps, and then I actually got introduced to Go language, because all that ecosystem, right? Whether you talk about Kubernetes, whether you talk about Docker, Prometheus, Dex, take any popular open source DevOps thing, it's mostly that you are landing into Golang space, right? I'm not
Exactly.
saying 100%, but
Yeah.
more or less, if you try to pick up randomly a DevOps tool, Terraform or anything, you will most likely be in the space of Golang. So I started my open source contribution for a Kubernetes ingress controller, F5 ingress controller, and also Nginx I was designing. So it was a Golang based application, and I found a lot of advantages of using Go language. And then I realized, like, okay, why these DevOps based applications are using Go language? Because you do a lot of multi-threading, you do a lot of networking related stuff, and Go language is the one that is most efficient at the point Kubernetes or Docker they were written. So that way I started learning Go language, and I enjoyed learning Go language, all that threading, all that small footprints of Go language. I like Go language.
Yeah. So from intro that we know that you are a senior engineer from your team, right? So how do you manage to share work, along with your team members, and how exactly do you actually plan your day just to complete all your tasks, even your work, office work, YouTube, and how do you actually manage your work-life balance?
Okay, so firstly, when you are working in a team, right? So the thing is that we try to put everything in Jira. So we are following Scrum. We are in Agile, and we plan all our activities. We do all the sprint ceremonies, and
Mhm.
everything is well defined backlog. We go through the backlog, we groom the backlog, and during the sprint planning, we pick up the items that are prioritized by the product owner, and we get them into the sprint. And during the sprint planning, we obviously estimate, I mean, they are estimated in the refinement, backlog grooming. But during the sprint
Yeah.
planning, we try to pick up the items depending upon the team members and what is our velocity, sprint velocity. And once we have that list of items, we start the sprint. And all the day we work on the activities that are in the sprint. But as a DevOps engineer or as a Golang, Kubernetes, this space, we are building GitOps application. So there are a lot of ad hoc issues, there are a lot of customer issues. So again, when there is a customer issue, you probably want to go to your product manager and
Yeah.
discuss, hey, what is a priority? Can I prioritize, deprioritize? So if there is any issues, then we have to resolve within the team. And after all this, I try to put 2 to 3 hours for myself apart from work. So
Mhm.
what I do is I am not a morning person. I don't start in the morning, but I keep myself late. So I will not suggest that, but I keep myself late and all that YouTube related activities and all. I do it after my working hours. So typically, yeah, this is how I plan. And regarding the team and senior engineering role, also I do this sprint ceremonies, all the things that are well defined in the agile. That is how I do.
Yeah. That's all for today, Abhishek. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Bhavya. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.